Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today for this week's edition of In the Pocket, it is longtime NFL quarterback Chase Daniel. Chase, how you doing, man?
Good. Just not envying you Chicagoans over there. And you're telling me it's 17 degrees out. It's 55 degrees here in San Diego today. And people are wearing puffer coats and Ugg boots and all those things. And I'm just like, man, I love my time in Chicago, but I'm glad I'm not in that weather anymore.
I'm fine with it. This is where I'm from. I'm a creature of this weather. When I go down to Miami for Thanksgiving every year, and it's such a disorienting experience to be in 85-degree weather around Thanksgiving, because my nature and my instinct is, okay, it's Thanksgiving time, I should wear a sweater. And then that doesn't work. But then every time I get back from that trip, it's just such a cold realization, literally a cold realization. I walk out of O'Hare to go get my Uber home, and I'm just greeted with this frigid wind. And that's exactly what happened on Monday when we got off the plane. So I should be more ready for it at this point, because we've done it for like 4 or 5 years going down there with my in-laws, but I'm never quite prepared for what that whiplash is like.
Well, and it's not even December. And I remember my 2 years in 18 and 19 with the Bears, and we would never go inside. Like, we would go inside on Fridays sometimes.
Was the Peyton Center even done then?
Yeah, it was the first year it was done was 19. So we got the first year in it, and it was amazing. But like, I just remember all the practices, even like in October, it would be frigid. It would be so cold. It would I don't even know how I did it, because I come the past 2 years here in LA, and I'm out there and it's like 70 and sunny every day when we're like practicing. And I remember wearing like full on sweatshirts, like hoodies, like beanies, all this stuff underneath my pads. And it was just, I guess you just got used to it. But now we went back to Kansas even for Thanksgiving, and it started snowing. Like on Thanksgiving, I'm like, it's going to be a cold winter for you guys, man. I can't even, I'm glad I'm not there.
Well, we went to school in Missouri, so you were there for 4 years, but it didn't get as cold in Missouri. And when it would snow, the town would shut down. But do you remember, were you still around in 2007 when there was that freezing rainstorm the day before Thanksgiving break?
It was awful.
That was one of the worst weather events I've ever been a part of. It was the day before we left for Thanksgiving. We had a party that night at my apartment complex at Campus Lodge. Remember all those apartment complexes just off campus? So we had a party there that night, and it rained, but it gets cold enough overnight where it freezes. So I woke up the next morning, and there was, no joke, there was an inch of ice on my car. And I had to go to work the next day at MC Sports, and I'm sitting there trying to chisel my car out of this just inch thick of ice. That's what weather in Missouri is like. It doesn't get snow that often, but it's worse.
And I remember driving on that. I had a single cab, red F-150, and it had cloth seats, and it was so light. It's like almost like those old Ford Lightnings that was just 2 seats. That's it. And I remember like trying to drive to the Matsy, which is the place where we work out at Missouri, the old one, and I couldn't even it's a huge downhill from those campus. We live right below this Campus Lodge. It's a huge hill, then you have to get a huge hill to go back up. And I remember I slid my back into my truck the entire way there. It was like I was drifting the entire way there because it was full on ice. I do not miss those days.
This time of year, when the weather changes, this is typically when we get a pretty good idea of what a lot of these NFL teams look like. And we're going to talk about a couple quarterbacks that have kind of settled in as we've gotten to this stage in the season, and what that might mean for them and their teams moving forward. So let's start with Jordan Love, the Green Bay Packers, and the hot streak that they are on right now offensively. Jordan Love, 4th in EPA per dropback over his past 4 games. And also, the Packers are 5th in passing success rate over that span. Why that's important is that early in the season, his EPA per dropback numbers were very high, but it was because they were buoyed by big plays. Just think back to those early games when they're hitting all those shots against the Falcons. They had a lot of big plays against the Bears, but down to down, they were struggling. They were down below the middle of the pack in success rate. So it wasn't as if they were efficient. It was that they were hitting a lot of big plays. Now they've settled into a version of this offense where the efficiency is there and the explosive plays are there. And that's really encouraging. So I wanted to dig into what we've seen from Jordan Love here over the past month or so and what that might mean moving forward. So when you're watching Love right now, What is standing out to you about what he's doing well within this Packers offense?
Well, I think he's gaining more confidence. And I tweeted this out the other day and I did a breakdown on him. And I was just so impressed because, the first 2 or 3 games of the year we watched and it was like they were rolling. And then there was like a 6-game lull, 5-game lull. And so I didn't really pay attention to him. And it's sort of the recency bias. And I probably should because it's my job and whatever. But they just weren't
really. You can't do it with all 32 teams. Guys are gonna slip through the cracks for 3-4 week stretches. There's just no way to keep up with it all.
Exactly. And that's the thing that just wasn't fun to watch. If I'm being honest, because it was just they weren't really hitting it. They have a bunch of rookies, a bunch of tight ends, runners that are like rookies. And so I put on the last 2 tapes of him, and I've just been completely impressed. And there's a couple reasons why. He's making throws when they're not there. So he's fitting balls into tight windows, which maybe he didn't try during the middle of the year for whatever reason, didn't want to turn the ball over, didn't want to do this. And I mean, even take, for example, the first play of the game of the Detroit Lions Thanksgiving game. I mean, it is bomb. Like it's a bomb, the first play of the game. And they came up and said, we're going to play man. He's like, no, we're not. And the free safety is actually in pretty good position. It's a corner post by Watson. And honestly, Watson easily walks in, but Jordan 2 hitches it and underthrows it, but he's still able to get up there and make the play. So like he's doing that more often. And also I want to say a little bit, what I've noticed is his arm angle. His arm angle is like insane's not even the right word. I didn't know he had that kind of arm talent. We talk about arm talent, and it's not arm strength. It's not how hard you can throw the football. What I view arm talent and what evaluators of NFL quarterbacks view arm talent is, it's how you change your arm angle depending on where you are at in the pocket or if you're on the run. And I mean, like 20% of the pockets in that NFL quarterbacks throw from are a clean pocket. So you're saying 80% of the time, we did a huge study on this in New Orleans. 80% of the time, the quarterback's moving, you have a guy in your face, somebody at your legs, and time again, on Thursday and Thanksgiving, he had guys in his face. I mean, the offensive line played okay. I didn't think this was their best game.
I thought they did a good job of giving him extra bodies and protection. I thought they were very smart with the way they protected, but one-on-one situations, they still have some issues, concerns. It's not the best group.
And I will say the best thing, what you just said, it was they got 4 hands on Aiden Hutchinson, who is the killer in that like rush team, right? Like in that front. And so I was really impressed with that. But just the arm angle, it's interesting because there's a couple times in the game where I'm thinking he has nowhere to throw the football and he probably just needs to throw it away, or it doesn't seem like he's taking a whole bunch of sacks because he's making the right decisions. He's throwing the ball away. But a couple of these like deep curls versus man, which is the absolute worst thing you could possibly have versus man coverage. You're hoping these, like we call them missile routes, like 18 back down to 16. You're hoping for zone cover 2, look the mic off, throw it in. He had a couple of these versus man, and he was able to move in the pocket, sidearm throw, and throw away from the defender. And just like that, those unique throws, which you're seeing time and time again. And that's sort of what I said and what I thought was, when I watched Jordan Love the last 2 weeks, in my opinion, he's taken that next step in the starting quarterback level. And that is, hey, not only you're not going to lose the game, you're not a game manager, but now you can put the Packers on your back and you can win games with your arms. I don't know if I would have said that 4 or 5 weeks ago, but he's trending upward. Can he continue to do it? I think their play calling has gotten even better down the stretch, because honestly, LaFleur has noticed this progression of Jordan Love. These rookie receivers are starting to come on, so it's a fun thing to watch for sure.
Creativity is the word I would come back to in terms of the type of throws, right? It's not about arm strength. It's about creativity as a thrower. And my biggest question with quarterbacks is always, when the answer isn't there for you within a given play, when nobody's open, how do you rise above the structure of the offense? Yeah. There are so many ways to do it. Some guys do it with mobility. Some guys do it with scrambling. Other guys, the arm angles and what you can create from muddy pockets, that's how you add to the offense. That's how you rise above what's available. Matthew Stafford being the best example, right? Matthew Stafford takes more than what's there on a given play, in part because of how creative he is as a thrower. And that is what we're seeing in flashes, at least, from Jordan Love. And it's not just trick shots for trick shots' sake.
Yeah,
it's him being able to get the ball off in these muddy pockets, or when he's backpedaling in the pocket, and getting more meat off the bone than a lot of other quarterbacks would. Yeah. And that is extremely encouraging when you're trying to find one of the handful of guys in the NFL who can consistently lift you above what a given play is going to give you.
Exactly. And that's exactly what Jordan's doing is, and you hit it right on. You're a little bit better at voicing what I'm thinking, but the creativity, and also just being able, like you said, like LaFleur can't call a perfect game. Any offensive coordinator, they're not going to call a perfect game, but can you, like you said, rise above the certain play call? Because, like, I'll take, for example, I'm going back to those those little dig curl routes. Okay, he's calling that on 2nd and long, and Detroit came out in man-to-man coverage. Jordan does not have an out for whatever on that play. They're like, hey, we're just going to let it roll versus man. That play sucks versus man, dude. Like, it is not good.
And they played a ton of man in that game.
And they played a ton of man. Season. Way more man. And you look, and I'm just imagining LaFleur on the sideline. He's thinking, he's like, damn. You know, he's like, man, I called this play. Let's see what's going to happen, because even your checkdowns are flats versus man-to-man. So he's like, hey, Jordan knows that you just got to make an all-star throw. And that's exactly what he does. And not only that, your receivers have to win. And what I saw versus that man coverage, which I haven't seen all year long, is those receivers winning versus man-to-man. And they got some speed there. That's the thing. Like, this is like one of the youngest teams in the National Football League. So they're building this thing the right way. I think they were 2-4 at one point. They're 5-6 right now, and right in the thick of the NFC playoff battle.
I was talking to somebody there yesterday and just talking about some of the progression we've seen for some of the young guys. And they said the most encouraging part is that we've seen them grow together. And that's what you're seeing. There are still fuck ups. You know, there was a play, I think, on the first drive where you have two guys running the same route. The tight end and the receiver are both running a little wrap route. He has nowhere to go with it. And it's like, all right, that stuff is still going to happen. Tucker Kraft is still just getting kind of worked into the offense now that Luke Musgrave is hurt. All of these guys are still very, very early in their careers. But you're starting to see the flashes of what those guys can be. Christian Watson finally showing up and showing you what type of force he can be within the offense. Jaden Reed giving them consistent juice in what they're doing. Even guys like Dontavian Wicks, who has been good for them in stretches. Malik Heath, who's another undrafted rookie. He had some moments against the Lions. Yep. So it was always going to be slow to get to the point that they wanted to get to. And that was beyond the quarterback being in his first year as a starter. It's all those other guys getting on the right page. Also, as you're dealing with injuries and shuffling along the offensive line. So the fact that it's all starting to come together with everyone at the same time, they're walking in lockstep toward where they want to be. I think that is the most encouraging part of watching this offense overall.
Is number 11 Reed?
Yes, he's a rookie as well.
Okay, so I'm going to be honest. Like, when you don't watch a guy like back to back weeks, you don't really know their weapons. In the last 2 weeks, the Chargers and this Detroit Lions game, the person other than Christian Watson that's flashed to me is Reed, number 11. Like, I'm watching him, I'm like, dude, this guy's got some juice. Like, he's got some real juice behind him. And so it's been cool to see other people stepping up, because, like, I'm gonna be honest, like, when I was watching, I had no idea who people were other than Christian Watson. And that's the thing, like, what you like to see is everyone growing together, and you're doing it in a way that everyone's really well coached. You can tell everyone cares. It's the classic Green Bay offensive guys, really no like stud number one receiver, but everyone sort of helping, right? Everyone helping out. And man, if they can continue to grow, especially because they're like one of the youngest teams in the NFL, LaFleur's got something to him. And that's the other thing that you look at the stats, okay? Because I'm a big stats guy. Through the first 11 games of Aaron Rodgers that he started and Jordan Love that he started, they're identical. 21 total touchdowns, 2,699 total yards. I mean, if you like people that are like just crapping on Jordan Love through the first like 4 or 5 games, like, give this guy, that's what we don't do. It's so recency biased in this like circle of covering NFL. They don't let guys grow. Okay. And they without just getting onto him, because everyone say, what have you done for? Okay. But like, dude, look at him. Look what he's put through. And I'm not saying that, hey, I think, but I don't know, like Green Bay has found their another 15-year starter, which is absolutely like, that could be wild. You go from like Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. Now there's a lot to go from it. He still has to continue to get better, but he's on the right track.
The thing about Jaden Reed that I love is that he is a skill set that they just haven't been missing in this offense for so long.
Juice,
they've tried to find it, whether it was Amari Rodgers or some other guys where just get the ball in their hands and let them go to work. And that's because they seek out a specific type of receiver typically. They go for these bigger guys. They have size thresholds that they really don't compromise on ever. But because he had the return ability in college, I think that made them a little bit more open to a guy with his size and his physical profile, and it's added a really cool layer to the offense. So talking about Jordan Love specifically, it's not all great, right? This is still a guy who's in his first season. There's some sloppiness. There's some things to clean up. Where do you think he still needs to improve after you go back and you watch the last couple of games?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not glaring holes, but there are two things in particular that I thought he just didn't do a great job of. And that is on the deeper throws down the field. I've seen at least 3 or 4 times in the Chargers and the Lions game, just the last 2 games, that he's underthrown balls. And he's underthrown these balls because his footwork is not great. And I'm saying on those plays, he's late on throwing. He might be a little bit late seeing it and processing. Oh, I can let this go. Like if he lets the big post on the first play of the game go on the first hitch rather than the second hitch, knowing that like Watson is a speed burner, it's an easy touchdown. And I think they ended up scoring on that play or on that drive. And so it was fine. It was fine.
Well,
but like
the play they scored on was that ball he fit in through a keyhole to Jaden Reed.
Well, and then Christian Watson ran the absolute wrong route. It's hilarious. If you actually go back and watch it, I'm like, what are they doing? Because he alerts it. And they're trying to run triple slant, which is a Green Bay like staple. And you're on triple slant, you're trying to hit the number 2 guy. And Christian Watson's supposed to have what we call a lookie. The lookie's supposed to run through the linebacker, which is playing hole coverage as a linebacker. And man, you're just reading the quarterback's eyes and going to it. Well, Christian Watson thinks that they're running that little bubble screen. Okay, so you got 2 guys on the outside running slants. Christian Watson's going to get the ball, and like halfway through the route, you can see he's like, oh crap. And then like, actually, I have no clue. Like he messed up not only the defender on him, but the whole linebacker. And somehow that ball got through there. But you can watch after, like Christian knows he messes up. He just puts his hands on his head. He's like, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing? It was hilarious. But honestly, the second thing too, if you go back and watch the second play of the game, they're running a flat and a slant on one side, okay? And they're running a hank route, which is like a hook route over the ball at 5 yards, a curl route at 12 yards outside, and a flat route. So you want to work the hank side versus this shell coverage. Shell coverage is too high look. Any quarters too high over there. And you want to work this, what we call dragon, slant flat versus any single high zone or man, okay? Well, he throws the slant second play of the game and gets his guy crushed, and it's quarters. He works the wrong side. And you look over here, the curl's standing wide open. Honestly, if he breaks the tackle, he might score. Like stuff like that's going to come up, like working the wrong side, because that's the type of offense that they are. They're hey, this is the side versus cover 2 and cover 4. This is the side versus single high zone and man. And the quarterback's got to be right. And it wasn't like it was being disguised. You see a couple of that. You see a couple of those plays like wrong reads, wrong reads within the game. And I go back to even the Chargers game. Okay. He's taken a huge high post versus quarters, and he's taken this deep curl versus cover 2. Well, he ends up throwing the deep post, underthrows it, and this missile versus cover 2, which is exactly what you want, is standing wide open. So there's a couple of these things on film that you could say, hey, he's not perfect. He needs to continue to get better. And it's not like it's 10 plays a game, but it's like 4 to 5 plays a game. And over the season, those plays can add up.
Is that okay in your mind for somebody that's on start 12? Do you feel like he's behind or ahead of where he should be?
I think he's actually above, in front of where he should be. And that's just the maturation process of being a quarterback. Like you're only going to get, people don't understand, like you're only going to get experience through playing. It sounds easy to say, but you're not going to get experience from practice or reps in preseason. Like, I'm sorry, it's just not the real thing. And he's just stacking weeks, man. That's just what they want him to do. They just want him to stack weeks on top of each other. Don't try not to make the same mistake twice, because there's going to be mistakes made. And quite honestly, that ball was completed where he threw that slant versus quarters, and only people that know like where he should have went, which is honestly the offensive staff and guys that have played the game, Like, he made the wrong read, but he completed it. Okay, 2nd and 2, we're good. But
I like that it was an aggressive choice. Like him ripping that ball. I think if you're going to make the wrong decision, make it that way. And because he did get his guy lit up, and I was thinking the exact same thing. It's like there's nothing preventing that quarter safety from just driving on that ball. But it's a completion. It's an accurate throw. One of my issues watching him is that for all the creativity and all the fun off-platform stuff, it can get a little sloppy at times, and he can spray some balls. And I think maybe that is something you just have to live with if this is going to be his play style. But every once in a while, this was true at the beginning of the season, and I think it still holds true even over these couple games. There are a couple where it's like, whoops, where that thing just gets away from him a little bit. And again, that evens out over time, and the ratio of cool, effective, impactful off-platform throws is so much higher than that spray every once in a while. Maybe it's just something that you kind of take with the bad or take with the good.
You do, and it's in every quarterback, right, is going to have those throws. You just want to see this guy get more consistent. That's the biggest thing. And quite honestly, I've seen a huge jump the last 2 games in him, just his confidence level too. Because isn't it wild? Like, I just go back and think about the history of the Green Bay Packers, and you look at their last 3 quarterbacks, right? Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, and all 3 of those guys have these crazy off-platform throws. And I'm like, okay, it's just, you just learn it. Like, Rodgers learned it from Favre, and Love learned it from Rodgers, and now they're perfecting as they go. Like, I think that is so cool to just know, like, hey, the Green Bay Packers quarterbacks for the last 3 decades or whatever it is, they just are known for off-platform throws. And it's just, it's cool to see.
It's November 29th. They don't have to make any definitive decisions right now, but we're going to try to make one for them anyway here. You're Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur. How are you approaching the Jordan Love situation this offseason? If you had to make the decision right now, which you don't, but we're going to do it anyway.
Oh, you're re-upping them. As soon as this season ends, you're re-upping him. And you're not, I mean, he's going to hit 40 million, I would think, but like, he's not going to be a $50 million guy now, but I think it's going to be a team-friendly contract. But I think for sure, like, you don't want your quarterback being a lame duck, especially with how he's played down the stretch. I think he's shown enough that if you put guys around him, if they continue to grow, he's shown enough to me to be in that contract situation. Because quite honestly, he's on a really friendly deal right now, man. Like, let's just be completely honest. Like, as far as starting quarterbacks go, and so look, it's a $7.5 million cap hit, which is nothing. But I guarantee you I don't want to guarantee it. I would imagine that they would absolutely do a 3 to 4 year deal, 2-year guarantee, and the APY is somewhere in the 40s.
The Daniel Jones
maybe high 30s. Yeah, and quite honestly, he's better than Daniel Jones. He to me looks like a guy, and quite honestly, you know, it's not really fair on Daniel Jones. I don't think the offense around him has been great, but I do think what the Packers love is continuity. They don't want all these changes. And quite honestly, with the state of the union right now in quarterbacking, I just don't know if there's 18 to 20 guys better than him in the world. And that says a lot. So if you have your guy, even if he's not the guy that you hope in some like Patrick Mahomes, he can still win you games. And he's doing everything that he was supposed to do, in my opinion, in this season to earn another shot and to earn another contract.
I'd be curious to see what they do in the draft. If he ends up being the guy and that they move forward with him. Bakhtiari is obviously on that monster contract. His future is very murky. Jeez. It's a really good tackle draft. And where they end up picking in the first round, could they find a tackle at that spot? You've got all those young weapons. So if you've got cost-controlled weapons, a cost-controlled left tackle potentially, if you draft one in the first round and you go cheap there, it's an interesting build of your roster. And they've got some decisions to make on defense. But again, I think that the overall trajectory of the youth movement that they've had on offense, they made an interesting set of bets, not doing anything in the veteran market at receiver. I appreciate that, because I think by doing that, you don't cut off pathways to opportunities and growth for your young guys. It's always nice to have one guy in the room where you can say, like, this is how you should do it. But I think just kind of rolling the ball out and saying, we're going to sink or swim with these 4 or 5 dudes in their first or second season. I do think there are benefits to that. And I think they're realizing some of those benefits.
I do think, and it's so funny you said that about veteran receivers. I do think if they end up having and wanting Jordan Love to be the future there, I do think that a true like 1 or number 2 receiver would help so much. Like so much within that room, but also Jordan as well. Like if Jordan's your guy, you want to build around him, and you need a guy at receiver opposite a Christian Watson, opposite all these other guys. I know they're trying to make these guys work, and that's great, but it just even adding a true number 2 guy for $10 million for a year or two in the veteran free agent market that fits your like team, that fits your offense, I think would be awesome.
Next year's Jacoby Myers. A guy like in that sort of mold. I think that's interesting. All right, let's get to another guy here who definitely has had his ups and downs over the last couple of years, but is on a pretty nice run, and that is Russell Wilson. Jordan Love was one of the biggest quarterback questions we had heading into this season. How Russell Wilson would fare with Sean Payton was definitely another. And over these 5 games that the Broncos have won, he's looked considerably better than he did at any point last season. When you watch Russ over these last couple of games, what has stood out to you about what he is giving the Broncos right now?
Well, he's giving them a chance. And quite honestly, I've been really impressed with Russ because everyone counted him out last year. Every single person was like, he's done. Maybe it's just the offensive coordinator. Maybe it's the head coach, Hackett, all those things. I think Sean Payton was a really good reset for Russell Wilson. And what I'm seeing is, first and foremost, that defense, the last 5 games in the 5-game win streak, 16 takeaways. So they're getting more drives on offense. They're getting more opportunities, and they're cashing in the red zone. Okay, they haven't been great on 3rd down. What I saw, even from the last 2 games, is they're letting Russ operate at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Okay, and that to me is awesome because that's where a veteran quarterback does his best. Okay. And you saw the last game against the Browns. They had this little 4x1 package where they motioned the halfback in. Like it's a menu of 4 or 5 plays. They have a trips package. That's a menu of 4 or 5 plays. They have an empty package. That's a menu of 4 or 5 plays. And Russ is just getting to a play that he likes and that he knows. And I've talked to the coaching staff in Denver. Like Russ loves that stuff. That's who Russ is. I don't think Russ is a guy that you can sit back and say, hey, you got to get through 3 reads. You got to get through 4 reads, work this side versus cover 2, this side versus cover 3, get to a man beater. That's not Russ. And if you go back and actually study Russ, even from his Seattle days, he's a look at number 1, look at number 2, take off. And that to me, outside of the start of the season, really the last 6 games, that's what this offense has become. And so they're sort of tailoring it around Russ. And you see these concepts that you've seen time and time again from a New Orleans Saints, Sean Payton-based offense, Joe Lombardi, all these guys. And they're also running the ball at a really, really amazing clip. Like I'm going in and I'm saying, man, they're not going to be able to run the ball against that Cleveland Browns defense. Man, Zach Strief, who's the offensive line coach in Denver, like came up with a master plan, in my opinion, for these run games. And it's check. And it's like, check with me, Russ, get us in the right. And I did not imagine they'd be running the ball against that Cleveland Browns defense on 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, getting first downs. And also Russ with his feet, right? Like 2 or 3 design quarterback runs. And not only that, okay, he's had some good quarterback design runs and some scrambles, but he's scrambling to throw. That throw to Troutman, I think, is a tight end on 82, like that, where he got his knee down. I mean, the play took like 10 seconds. Like that to me is vintage Russ. You get Russ in the red zone, Russ is going to cook. And that's another thing too. They throw go ball. They do try to throw the ball down the field. Russ is one of the best deep ball, go ball throwers that I've seen the last 5 years. Like if he gets it up and down, whether it's a back shoulder, over the top, all this stuff. Now he missed some throws too. Like they had some stuff wide open. You got to give credit to Sean Payton. They cooked up some plays for wide open, some of these deep crossing routes that they hit time and time again. But I think he's playing at a really, really high rate, and it's been impressive to watch.
I'm curious. I would love to be a fly on the wall for the conversations between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson this season, because it seems to me that there has been a premium put on ball security and taking care of the football consistently. Yeah. Russ has his lowest ADOT, I believe, of his entire career. Okay. Over this win streak, he has the lowest ADOT in the entire NFL.
What is ADOT?
Average depth of target.
Okay.
So his average air yards per target is the lowest in the NFL over their 5-game win streak.
Yep.
And if you compare that to the style of play we've seen from Russ over the last 3, 4, 5 years in Seattle, where it's just bombs away all the time, it feels a little bit different. He is 29th over this stretch in the percentage of his throws that go to the sticks. again, stylistically, just not what we typically expect from Russell Wilson. He's only thrown 4 interceptions all season.
Yeah.
It really does feel like the emphasis there is 1, 2, if it's not there, you take off, don't put the ball in harm's way. We're going to run the ball well. We're going to run the ball a lot. You can make something happen out of structure if it's there, but take care of the football. And that overall recipe, even if it's not putting up monster point numbers, they're not breaking records, they're not a top 10 offense, but it's given them a chance. To me, it feels like the right formula for what this team is and what he is at this stage of his career. And it's actually kind of what I thought they'd be. He's played so much better than I thought he was going to play this year after what we saw last season. Even if, again, the numbers aren't fantastic. Overall, down to down, that Browns game being a really good example, he is giving them something in a way that he did not give it to them last year. So I feel like whatever they've settled on, his role within the offense, what they're telling him, what the structure of the offense is, it's working. It's a partnership that in its current form, it's working about as well as it could right now.
Yeah, and it just took a little bit of time to get rolling because I think just over time, right, that Russ and Sean Payton have been together, it just takes time for a relationship to form, for trust to form. And I think Russ is starting to understand, hey, Sean Payton, and you're exactly right. I mean, that's what these guys told me, like, hey, just take care of the ball. Like, that's all we want Russ to do, take care of the football, make plays when they're there outside of the pocket, which they've been doing. We're going to run the ball. And our defense is otherworldly, like these last 5 games. If we're getting the takeaways and we're not turning it over, right? Like that's a shot to win. And they're all, I mean, it seems like they figured this thing out on defense. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get this run going these next few weeks. And another thing that's been really impressive to me about Russ and the Broncos offense is they've been doing this against pretty good teams. Yeah. Right. I mean, it's not like they're playing bad teams. And so, you know, this week going into Houston is going to be interesting to me how they end up playing CJ Stroud, how they do this. But I think just Russ, I think he's finally bought in. And I say finally, I mean, the last year, all this stuff's talked about, but he's sort of rewritten the narrative about him. Like, hey, I can sort of mold into who Sean Payton wants me to be. Like, I trust Sean. I like Sean. I want to revive my career. I still want to be able to play because he's still got that bug in him that wants him to go deep, man. Like you could tell. And I just think he's playing smart. And if it's not extremely open, right, he just tucks it and runs, or he tucks it and makes something else happen. And so sometimes that's what I don't think, the bigger picture of this, sometimes like with Russ and veteran quarterbacks who have done it before, who have won Super Bowls before, who've played at an MVP type level before, sometimes, you know, those guys want to say, hey, I just want to do it my way. And I don't want to buy in. And I just want to make sure that we're doing this my way. And look at what it got him last year, because it was his way last year. And so I think he's really changed his mindset. He's really refocused himself. And honestly, that deserves a lot of praise, because these guys I'm not saying Russ has a big ego, okay, but he loves himself some Russ, okay? And it's hard sometimes for guys that are like that to really pull back and be like, hey, do a little bit of self-realization, understand that this way isn't working. I have a Super Bowl winning Hall of Fame coach in Sean Payton. Let me dive right in. So honestly, that you should applaud that. Like as fans, like we should applaud that, because that doesn't happen very often.
So they're 12th in offensive DVOA right now, which is higher than I thought. And part of that is driven by the schedule that they play. That's an opponent adjusted metric. According to, I was going to say Football Outsiders, it's actually FTN Fantasy now is where DVOA lives. But according to Aaron Schatz's numbers, they have played the 5th hardest schedule of NFL defenses so far this year. Yeah. And so that is part of the reason that those numbers are pumped up a little bit. But that's what you're seeing. Couple things. One, the turnover well is going to dry up at some point on defense. Yeah. It's not going to keep going like this. So when that happens, what does this team look like, I think, is a major question. The other part of this is, even with everything that you just said, how he's tailored his game to what they want to do offensively, the fact that this partnership looks like it's working compared to maybe some of the other timelines we could have followed, I still am curious what they're going to do this offseason and whether or not he's going to be the quarterback there moving forward. Because I don't think he's tied to Sean Payton at all. I don't think Russ's fate, it matters as far as Sean Payton's job security. I think this has been he's what we have. He's what you have to work with. Let's see what happens. And I think it has worked out fairly well. right? This is the type of team I expected these Broncos to be. They're solid offensively. The defense is still a work in progress, but they are capable and they are competent compared to what they were last year. And that's what I expected. Whether or not that's enough for them to commit to him beyond this season, I think becomes the biggest question.
Well, and that's what Sean Payton's known for. Sean Payton gets his guys. And if you're not his guy, you're out of there. And quite honestly, this offseason with all those guys on the team left over from Hackett and the previous regime, John Elway, he hasn't had a chance to get his guys. And let's just be real about it. Like, Sean Payton will be the GM this offseason. Any move and every move he wants to make will happen. So that is an interesting, especially no bigger than the quarterback, right? Because you just got to look at I can't imagine them. I don't know. I mean, like, do they draft a quarterback high? And then I look at Sean Payton with rookie quarterback. He's never had one. He's always had a veteran guy. He's always had a veteran guy to run his offense. So do they want to start over with a rookie and try to get some draft capital and try to get some of that? Or do they want to go with a big ticket name, veteran free agent? Or do they want to trade for something? Because what I guarantee you, I don't like guarantees, but there will be a splash move in Denver, whether it's a quarterback or not this offseason. Sean Payton's going to have his way with that roster, man.
The only problem is, even if they move on from Russ, he has a $35 million cap hit this year in 2024 and a $50 million cap hit in 2025. So they're going to have a hard time
trading them
for another quarterback, paying a premium for another quarterback. So we'll see what happens. I think that there is a potential path here where Jarrett Stidham is just the starter next year because they don't have a better option. They signed him to a 2-year deal. He's going to be on the roster next year. He's been capable in stretches. Do they go with kind of a stopgap option as they figure out what their options are moving forward? Because it seems like that might happen just because, again, they don't have a ton of resources. Are they going to be in a position to draft a guy? All of those things you have to kind of weigh, consider, juggle if they do move on from Russ.
Yeah, I mean, a super interesting decision. I just can't imagine that. I mean, maybe that Sean would go on with just Stidham. I don't know. It's a great discussion point. And honestly, if Russ keeps playing the way he's playing, he might be there next year, to be honest with you. Like, if he gets them in contention with it, but it's going to be interesting because there's always the unknown with Sean Payton. Like, he just does what he wants, man. Like, he don't care. Like he sees a vision, bro. It's his vision. He gets some people on board because he's a hell of a seller. He sells the crap out of it. Okay. And that's where they go.
We'll see how fast they get on that New Orleans Saints credit card plan, where they just start kicking the can down the road financially.
No doubt.
Right. Oh, Russ is on the books for $35 million. We'll bring in Kirk Cousins here for another $40. It's okay. We'll figure it out later.
Yes,
that's a problem for future George Payton. 3 years down the road when you got to figure out all this stuff money-wise.
No doubt.
Right, let's step away here from the quarterback performances from this week and talk about a couple big picture things that have unfolded in the NFL over the last few days. With Frank Reich fired, the coaching carousel is now already in motion. And we're going to start hearing about some of these hot names in this year's cycle. And it's likely going to be another batch of coordinators from some of these successful teams. You're already starting to hear it. Ben Johnson's name is going to be said 1,000 times between now and the end of the season. Brian Johnson's name from Philadelphia, Mike McDonald in Baltimore, all of these guys. That discussion and that way of framing the search for your next head coach always brings me back to this central question. Okay, what is the difference between the skill set necessary to be an effective coordinator and the skill set necessary to be an effective head coach? Because some of these guys, despite their resumes as a coordinator, they are never going to bridge that gap. They are never going to cross into this, I'm a quality head coach on top of what I could do as a play caller. Yeah. So in your experience, what separates the best coordinators from the best head coaches?
Good agents. No. I mean, that's definitely part of it. But I think
that's how you become a head coach. That's not how you become a successful head coach.
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest thing is, are you a leader of men? There's a huge difference between I call really good football plays on a call sheet and look at it, okay, versus I rally the troops. I'm good in front of the team, because quite honestly, like, at the end of the day, it comes down to, if you're a head coach, do the guys trust you? Do they believe in you? Do they buy into your vision? And can you talk to them in a way to get them? And these are grown men. These aren't college age kids. Okay. These are grown men with families. Can you get them to buy into your strategy, to your 1-year plan, to your 3-year plan? And is it actually working? Like I've been around, I'm not going to say some names. I've been around some coordinators that are great at calling plays, and they're just not great at talking to the offense. They'll have the quarterback coach do it. And quite honestly, some people just don't want to do it. They're like, hey, this is my job. My job's not to rah-rah this offense. I'm supposed to set a vision and cast a strategic way to hit that vision. Okay, but I can do that without talking to the team. I think like that's why these like you're starting to see more and more. And like I just go back to Dan Campbell. Like Dan Campbell wants nothing to do with calling plays. And I know he wasn't a coordinator, so this isn't really but like the dude, like every single person in that room, including front office, including executives, including GM, they're going to run through a wall for him, man. Like that's what you need. That's that X factor in these coordinators.
You think that's the most important thing? It's just about making guys feel a certain way when they come to work every day?
Yeah. Yeah, because think about it. You do the same exact thing time and time again. So on Monday, during season, I'm talking, on Monday, your schedule is the exact same. On Tuesday, your schedule is the exact same. Wednesday, it's for 20 weeks. That monotony of that dude is not fun. I mean, it is not fun, especially if you're losing. Can you keep a locker room together? Can you keep a locker room energized, enthused? All these things, to me, that's what I've known the best people and head coaches to do.
So how do they?
Yeah.
Well, those guys that you're talking about, give me examples of like how you create that buy-in, how you create that interest when it is December 8th and people are hurt and it's cold and they don't fucking want to be there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And you're not in the playoffs. I think the biggest thing that I've seen in some examples are you got to spice things up in team meetings, man. It can't be the same old monotone thing. And that's the biggest thing that people don't understand is like, when I was playing quarterback in college, even like people followed me because I was the quarterback, but I did it in a way that empowered other people, if that makes sense. And so you got to be that rah-rah guy. You got to feel that energy. That energy in that juice is if they're seeing you do it, they're going to want to do it. And so I think it's so hard to explain to people. But if you're coming into a team meeting, you're cold, you're frustrated, and you have a head coach talk to you like this, and you're just monotone, dude. And I've had coaches do that. They ain't gonna buy in. You got to be energetic. You got to actually believe. And that's the biggest thing too, is people like players. Okay, players will see right through a guy that is not himself, like that is a fraud. They're going to be able to find you out eventually because it will happen. It will happen. So if you're just your true self, if you're authentic, if you can be a leader of men, if you can listen to your players, okay, at the end of the day, the buck stops with you as a head coach. But if you can take advice and recommendations outside of what you think it should be, and if you open yourself up for people to come in, if you make your like office accessible, all these little things, it's not just like, I can't just tell you one little thing. It's all these things stacked upon each other, to me, that makes a head coach. And quite honestly, like even the smallest thing is a practice schedule. Like a practice schedule is so important, like down to the details of stuff on what makes guys ticks. Like if you can throw a bone to guys, hey, on Thursday, we're supposed to be in full pads in December. Hey guys, we're going to go shells. Like just those little spurts of energy throughout the day and like little gives and takes. Oh my God. Like I can't tell you how many times there's been like, oh, hey, take the pads off. We're like, what? No shoulder pads. Like it seems so small, but like when you're in this business, all the little things matter.
All this stuff, and I know you played for really good head coaches, Andy Reid, Sean Payton. I'm sure there are nuggets from all of those, both of those guys in this conversation. But a lot of this stuff just reminds me of Mike Tomlin, right? Like where Mike Tomlin has fallen short in building a staff, having a vision for what you want to be offensively, especially in this day and age, is a hugely important part of being a head coach. I think that Mike Tomlin has fallen short at that recently in terms of how they've tried to put this together. But the reason they've been able to be successful is that he does all that other stuff right. Even the practice schedule part of it. I remember hearing stories about his first year in Pittsburgh and how guys just loathed practice. And they just, the amount of resentment that he built up because of how hard they were practicing continuously in the summer. And they had veteran leaders have to go to him and be like, listen, Mike, we can't do this way anymore. Like we're going to run out of gas. You're going to run us into the ground. And he was open to that sort of feedback. But then you think about the way that those practices are actually structured in Pittsburgh during training camp. He'll do one-on-ones and he'll put like Minkah Fitzpatrick covering George Pickens in one-on-ones. And there's like, he'll talk about it afterwards and he doesn't give anything away, but he's like, we do everything for a reason. And we do all of this stuff for a reason. Like that is happening for a very specific, like pointed thing that we're trying to accomplish. And I think that those little things are lost when you're just thinking about who draws the best plays on the paper. And there's just no way to understand it when you're not around it. I haven't been around it, but you pick up on those small things when you watch teams practice, when you see how they operate. And for me, it feels like the biggest thing that separates these guys, the guys who are good coordinators, the guys who are good head coaches, can you widen your lens? Can the scope of what you see, appreciate, control as it grows, can you maintain the same authority and expertise over all of those different things? And I think that there are some guys that can just never do that. And there are some guys who succeed when they're trying to do that. And I honestly think that's why we've seen some guys be really successful as head coaches recently who aren't play callers. Like what Dan Campbell has done is he's been able to kind of step away from that and just say, like, I set the building, I set the tone, I make in-game decisions. That's who I am. The same goes for Nick Sirianni. And what Nick Sirianni has done in Philadelphia, I think Nick would tell you that he is a better head coach play in and play out, and in terms of how they build the plan there, than he would be if he was calling the offensive plays. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. I mean, you know, I remember the first year that Nagy was in Chicago, 2018, one NFL coach of the year. We were 12-4, should have been 14-2. And I remember the first couple of weeks going to his office and just chatting because we had, you know, he's my quarterback coach in KC. And just like, hey, how's it going? Just me asking him, just like friends, like, hey, how you doing? He's like, man, like, this is like the first couple of weeks on job, like, this is insane. Like just everything that we're dealing with. Like, I don't care what food we serve for lunch, but they're asking me about it. And so it's just like those
job,
details. Man. That's the job. And so I think with these first-time head coaches that do handle play calling, which is what they're, especially offensive play calling, which is what they're calling card for, the other little things could slip through the cracks. So the Sirianni, the Dan Campbell, even Nagy got to a point in 2018 and 19 where he did a lot better. And you have to, you know, offload some of these jobs on other people. And I think that's the best way moving forward, because you're gonna get burned out because it's 24/7, 365. You have to have other people that you trust around you. And I think the biggest thing for a head coach, you have to hire a good staff. You have to hire a staff that you trust, your offensive play caller, your defensive play caller, and say, hey, I'm still going to have my hands in offense and defense, but you two coordinators, you coordinate. You do your actual job. I'll oversee it. I'll make in-game decisions. I'll do all this other stuff. I'll set the vision of the organization, and we're going to go, and we're going to lockstep, and we're not going to deviate from that. To me, those are the best type of head coaches.
This might be a hard question to answer. When you're practicing, you're going through a practice, and you can feel the tone of the practice, how a certain team practices. How much of that do you think is dictated by individual position coaches collectively, and how much of you think that is dictated by the head coach coming all the way on down? I'm sure it's a little bit of both, but who do you think, in terms of setting what a team feels like, do you think the staff does that more than the head coach collectively, or do you think the head coach still has the biggest influence on what that is?
I think it's the head coach without a doubt, man, like without a doubt. And with practice, the head coach sets it. I mean, like, it's like you can start trusting your coordinators as you go in, but I guarantee the first couple of years of guys, like, they're going to want it to be done their way, and they're going to coach. They can coach up these coaches on how to talk to these players and how he sees this vision being portrayed among the players. And then those coordinators and position coaches can go out to their players and do it. So it's a trickle down effect, if that makes sense. But that's the thing. You got to have good guys, man, on a staff. Because if you don't have good guys, then you're constantly worrying about, are those guys doing their job? Are those guys portraying what I want portrayed to the team? And those are the best head coaches I've been around. Is they'll pop into meetings, like stay for 3 or 4 minutes, hang in. Hey, how you doing? How you like the plan? Okay, cool. Like, they're constantly taking feedback.
All right, let's stick with Carolina and the dynamic there for a bit. Along with firing Frank Reich, they also fired Josh McCown and Deuce Staley. And that puts a guy like Andy Dalton in a pretty interesting position, right? You fire the quarterback's coach. You're brought in as this mentor for a rookie quarterback, and it has been nothing but awful since you arrived in terms of how it's gone on offense. And I want to talk about the day-to-day of that role, which you're very familiar with. You did that for Mitchell Trubisky in Chicago. You did that for Justin Herbert in Los Angeles, even though it was his second year. You were brought in as a mentor figure, right? Somebody to kind of help that young quarterback along early in his career. So how can a veteran in that position specifically help a young quarterback in a situation like Carolina's looking at right now?
Yeah, I mean, Bryce Young's definitely going to remember his first season in the NFL, man. It is not going good. But I think like an Andy Dalton or myself, I think the biggest thing when going into a team, when you sort of know you're that veteran mentor and they're going to go with a young guy, you got to really gain the trust of the starter and of the young guy. So that's what Andy Dalton has done. And you can just see it. Like, you got to be able to, you can't go in and be like, hey, I've done this in my career, you should trust me. That's not how it works. Like, that's not how it works. You have to build a relationship with the starter and the backup, and then you can start mentoring him along the way, saying, hey, look, this is sort of the schedule during the week on what I did. This is sort of what worked for me. How do you feel about this? Do you want to do this? Look, we're going to come in on Tuesdays from 8 to 3, even though it's an off day. And this is what we've watched. This is how we've watched. This is exactly the order on what we like. So when you build that relationship and then, you know, these starters, these young starters trust this mentor, that's when you see the relationship flourish. And you can see when Bryce comes off the field, he's going to Andy. Like when Mitch came off the field, he's going to me, or Justin came off the field, he's going to me. Hey, all right, what'd you see, Chase? Here you go. So I think that's when you start to build that trust. And there's a lot involved in it. And it's not just like the game of football either. I think people lose that because within the building, the NFL building is really unique. It's a dynamic sort of atmosphere. And when the starter during season is he's just focused purely on the game and the game plan. So all this other crap that comes through, you're sort of the filter. Like, people come to you, equipment guys. I've had like nutritionists. I've had athletic trainers. I've had other coaches, like tight end coaches, running back coaches, come up to me because they don't want to bother Justin or they don't want to bother Bryce. It's not because they're not scared of them. They just understand that dynamic. So as a backup, you're sort of like a politician in a way that you have to pick and choose what to say to the starter and how to say it to the starter in a way that is, one, not going to piss them off because you know they just want to focus on ball, and two, in a way that could possibly help the team. So there's been a lot of situations where I've just be like, that doesn't matter. I'm not bringing that to him. I won't say that to him. I'll be like, oh yeah, I'll be like, I'm for sure saying that to, you know? So it's a slippery road. And I think when you're around the league long enough, like at least for me, I can't speak for Andy, but at least for me, you know how to filter and what to filter and what to bring to the starter and what the starter is going to want and need. And I think that's, to me, what makes the position of backup quarterback so unique, and this mentor as well.
How do you decide how forceful to be with going to that person with some of this help? Like early on, I'm sure there's part of you that hangs back, gauges how much do they want, when do they want it? How do you figure out how much you should be presenting some of this information and how much you should be waiting for those questions to come your way?
On every team I've been on where I've been this veteran mentor, I've always, for the most part, just sat back and listened and just let the quarterback talk, let the offensive coordinator and the quarterback coach talk, and then I'll pop in. And as soon as I get a good feel for the room, because every quarterback room is different. Every quarterback room is different. There's not one the same. And you got to know there's sort of an alpha in the room. A lot of times it's the starter. A lot of times it can be the backup because the starter just doesn't really want to talk. So you got to almost have to understand what this starter is thinking and then voice it. You have to be the voice of reason in the room to the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator. Like, a lot of that happens, man. It's like, it really is being a politician. So I think for me, at least me personally, I waited a little bit and I just sort of saw and sort of I try to just get to know the person, the starter, and then I can be like, okay. And then I might ask questions in a right way that'd be like, okay, cool. I got you, man. Like, and then you just sort of roll. And that's how Justin and I were. And that's why it worked so well for those 2 years.
What are you trying to deflect in those conversations with the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator? Is it, we don't really like this versus this. I don't know if that's going to work. Is it working through some of those details? What are you trying to do? Like, exactly. Are you trying to say stuff through the quarterback? Are you trying to filter some of that information out? Like, what does that politicking look like? What's the end game, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah. The end game for me was always to make the starter feel the most comfortable within the scheme and the play design and the concepts and the game plan. That is it. And quite honestly, toward the end of my career, because I had built up so much goodwill and people had known that, hey, this Chase guy sort of knows what he's talking about. We trust him. He's been with some really good head coaches. I would just be blunt. I was so sick and tired of the politics within the room. I'd be like, hey, like he doesn't, like, let's not run that. We're not doing it. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, as easy as blunt as that. Now, I wasn't always that way. When I was a little bit younger, I would say it in a way. I've always been really outspoken. And I think that's why a lot of teams have brought me in, just because you're outspoken, but in a way that's courteous, respectful, but also, your stuff, man. Like you're studying, you have to prove that you know your stuff way more than a player. And so I think at least what I hoped my words carried weight. And then, at the end of my time in the NFL, I was just telling it how it is. I was so sick and tired of that politics stuff, man.
Well, in Los Angeles specifically, it felt like that would have been easy because you and Joe go back so far. So when you're sitting there in the offensive meeting room, that's probably easy to do, even if you don't know the head coach very well. And it also seems like Justin's personality lends to that, right? Where you probably had to speak up for him a little bit, especially in his first year in the system, where maybe he wasn't willing to advocate for himself early on in the way that he might have been by year 2.
Yeah, it's a fair assessment. And I think that's what I've always sort of been, is I've been brought in by coaches that know me. And so that trust my decision-making. So they expect that actually out of me in the quarterback room is, hey, what are you seeing? Because they're so, like, these offensive coordinators and quarterback coaches, they're so dialed in to the current game plan that sometimes their lens, like you said earlier, doesn't widen on like, hey, well, we should probably marry this up with this run game formation, or, hey, we have this same play in, but it's out of the wrong personnel. Or, hey, we have this out of multiple personnel. Let's just do 21 and 12. All those things, and it's different from room to room. That's sort of how the dynamic works.
That it makes sense that you'd be comfortable kind of operating that way with Lombardi. But when you were in Chicago, even if you knew Nagy, you probably didn't know Mark Helfrich before you got there. You probably didn't know Dave Ragone when you got there. Yeah. So how do you get to that place? Like, how do you get to a place where you feel comfortable kind of asserting yourself in those moments when you don't have a previous relationship with those guys?
I just think it's all built on trust. And that's why, but honestly, like, it's built on trust, and the coordinator's got to trust you. You got to trust the coordinator. But at the same time, if you're bringing a guy like Andy Dalton in, he's been around. He's thrown for a ton of yards. He knows what he's talking about. So automatically, when a guy like that walks in, you have a higher hearsay, or you have a higher like hierarchy in that room, just because you've done it, man. Like, you've done it. It's all built on experience. So like right away with Andy, you can tell he probably just is like, hey, this is how it is. Like, and you how can you not trust a guy like that? He's been around, he's done it. So the Andy Dalton example is a perfect example for me.
How were the questions that Mitch would come to you with and Justin would come to you with different?
Well, I think first of all, two completely different offenses. And so a lot of the times, at least with Mitch didn't have that crazy successful. It was 2017 was his rookie year.
Yeah.
Yes. He didn't have this crazy successful 2017 rookie year like Justin Herbert did in 2020. So there's a big difference. Whereas Mitch probably wanted more help in, hey, the schematics of how we're going about a week. Let's set a schedule. Let's get something that really promotes. You did this with Drew. You did this with Alex. Like, how did they do it? Like, a lot of those type of questions. And then obviously with the scheme came that because I was with Nagy, whereas Justin was more, hey, like, look, what schedule do you think fits? I sort of have this. Now let's just get right back into scheme, because look, I'm trying to learn a new offense for the second time in 2 years playing. I had an offensive rookie of the year. Like, he didn't need any of that help from the playing side. What he really what I admired about him was he always came to me and like, hey, like, what do you think about this? How do you see this read happening? How do you think I should talk to this receiver about this? Like all the outside things other than football is what really Justin focused on.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's something that obviously you've got a perspective seeing a bunch of different guys do it. So, Andy Dalton is an interesting spot, as I'm sure you have been in multiple times in your career in that role. So something to keep an eye on here as we get toward the end of the season in Carolina, where he is going to be partially backup quarterback. I'm assuming partially quarterback coach as well over the next 2 months. Chase Daniel, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for listening. We will be back next week. In the meantime, please continue to check out everything else on the Athletic Football Show feed. Dane's first mock draft is out on the Athletic. Ooh. They broke all of that down on Prospects to Pros this week, so definitely check that out. Please come back for our Week 13 preview. We've got a great Thursday Night Football game this week that we'll be breaking down live on YouTube shortly after that wraps up, so please check that out as well. For now, sincerely appreciate you guys listening. We will talk to you very soon.